All right, so thank you for joining. Today we will see why is phishing downshifting targets and how can Tier 2 and Tier 3 institutions mitigate this impact. So I'm Matthew Platten. I take care of the operations for Channel IT. I'm specifically focused on the fraud management, so you have my contacts here. So today what we will be seeing is basically we will analyze a typical fraud case. Excuse me. And on our next session on Friday, we will learn how we can defeat this typical phishing fraud case using the Appgate DTP framework technology. So in the chat channel, you should see a form. If you have any questions, do not hesitate. Fill in this form and we will be very happy to give you more information, of course. So let's get started with this fraud case. So why are we seeing this downshift from Tier 1 to Tier 2 and Tier 3 institutions? Well, the answer is very easy. The fraudsters need to continue to make a living. Okay, those poor fraudsters have been developing specific technology and specific tools in order to attack Tier 1 institutions and Tier 1 governments. The problem is that since a few years, while the phishing industry has been thriving, I mean, we're looking at 12.4 billion for the last 5 years, I think, most of the Tier 1 institutions have been ramping up security in order to protect themselves against this threat. Okay, so companies such as Appgate, but also a lot of others, have developed specific technologies in order to protect against this ongoing threat. The problem is that now the fraudsters possess a toolkit and a technology allowing them very easily to launch very sophisticated attacks around social engineering. And what we are seeing is that since Tier 1 institutions are now protected against this kind of threat, there is a downshift from the fraudster industry targeting less well-protected institutions and banks, for example, by using the same technology that was developed in order to attack Tier 1. And this is an increasing threat. Okay, this is starting to be a real problem because we are seeing second-level banks and second-level governments in terms of financial spread, of course, I'm speaking, which are being attacked with very sophisticated technology which were initially developed for much bigger targets. And those institutions are not yet protected against this kind of threat. So I always like to start my presentations with a number, and this number is 80%. Phishing today represents 80% of the fraud which is faced by institutions. We are not speaking here of very advanced technical hacking or penetration. We are speaking of social engineering. This is by no means the most sexy, the most interesting technically kind of attack that is being witnessed today. But this is by all means the most devastating. Because if we think of all the major attacks we saw those last few years, Marriott, Halifax, HSBC, whatever. All those very devastating attacks were always initiated by phishing, because phishing is a social engineering attack and it relies and leverages the weakest link inside your security. And this weakest link is a human being. So we always think of education in order to protect ourselves against this threat. Okay, and since 10 years, 15 years, eventually 20, we have seen disclaimer messages on all the websites of governments, telecoperators, banks, telling to their customers, careful, we will never ask you for your password, or careful, we will never send you an email asking for your credit card information or an email to click on a link. And despite this ongoing education effort, what we are seeing is that phishing is getting more and more successful over the years, and that the damage in terms of financial, monetary, and intangible loss, which is damage to your brands, is on the rise, despite all this educational effort, because we know that education doesn't work. You cannot educate your customers against social engineering. So after this little introduction, let's look at the anatomy of a phishing attack. And on our next session, we will see how we can mitigate or eliminate this kind of threat. So phishing always starts with a bait, okay? And what we are seeing today is that the biggest bait, the most juicy worm a fraudster can put on his phishing hook is always an email. Okay, email represents between 80 to 90% of the phishing activity. And those emails always follow the same logic. The first thing is that we will see either an identity, either a domain spoof. So one of your customers or one of your citizens, if you are a government institution, will receive an email. And this email will say, well, in this example, I used the bank as an example because this is a phishing I'm seeing at least 2 or 3 times a week for different banks or different institutions. You will receive an email, and this email will pretend to be your bank or your government. Okay, so there is 2 kinds of ways to pretend it. Either we have what we call identity spoof, where a fraudster would send, for example, an email coming from your bank or your government at gmail.com. Okay, and this email will pretend to be your bank or your government. This kind of email today doesn't have a very high impact because the time where a Nigerian prince would offer to share his millions with you is long gone. And this kind of email doesn't resonate very well with the public anymore. But then we are seeing a second kind of threat, which is domain spoofing. Today, it is very easy to send an email coming directly from the domain of your government or of your bank, if this bank or this government, for example, is not protected. So I can send an email coming from your local government very easily, and a basic user, which is not educated in this technology, will have absolutely no way of making the difference between a genuine and a spoofed domain email. Okay, so in the next session, I will show you how we can do that and how it works exactly. Then the second component typically is a threat. So in this case, once again, I used a bank, but we can easily replace this message by another kind of threat or another kind of enticement. For example, dear citizen, you are eligible to a tax rebate. In order to claim your rebate, please click there. And inside, we also find a malicious link, because the finality of a baiting, okay, of an email or even social media baiting, which we are seeing, that's starting to appear, but not yet too much in this part of the world. We also see a lot of SMS, it's called smishing, which is starting to entice people with a link. This link will always take you back to a malicious website. So this is a bait, okay? And once the client activates this bait, the finality is to go to a website. And this is the phishing attack itself. We are out of the phase of planning and targeting, where we are seeing emails being received by potential victims, and those victims are directed to a specific website. So how those websites works? Well, we are all familiar with those phishing websites. The first thing is a URL shaping. The idea is to fool the victim in thinking that he's on the legitimate website. But since this phishing attack cannot take place on the legitimate URL now are shaped in order to give the illusion of being legitimate. So you would have 3x.yourbank or yourgovernment.com, for example, and then you will have an extended URL, which is actually the real domain. And since people do not know how subdomains work most of the time, well, they will think that this URL is genuine. The second thing we will do is a page shaping. So the page itself, 90% of the time now, is just an active referral link. So actually the page is taken directly from the original web page of the target. Okay, so if I want to leverage a local bank, for example, I will have a referral link that will display the original page of this bank, which means I have multiple language support. I have a page which is optimized for smartphone or optimized for the screen of the client. And I will not have any alert on this page because this page, all the links will be working. This page will be actually the genuine page of the institution which is being leveraged. And then inside, what I have is a malicious link or a CSS shaping, for example, where only the fields which are of interest for me as a fraudster will be redirected to my specific domain. And this allows to fool customers very, very easily. And this is something, as I say, I see at least twice a week. Okay, this is a big trend in building phishing pages today. So then the method. Well, the method is very easy. Actually, those pages are optimized just in one goal. The goal is first to harvest credentials. So the client or the future victim would be enticed to provide login and password, for example. Then once it has provided login and password, typically they will receive an error message saying, oh, there is a problem with your identity. Please verify your identity. Provide us your credit card number, for example, and all your credit card details. The reason why they are doing this is very easy. If a person has started delivering information, this means that this person really believes that this web page is genuine. So might as well get as much information as possible. So the second stage, for example, of this attack that I'm describing, which is an attack I saw again this week for a major local bank, is to get as much information as possible. And then third stage, for example, the fraudsters will try to harvest an SMS OTP because this bank still uses SMS, which is a completely obsolete form of validation, by the way. But there also, we will speak about it on Friday. Why is validating your customers with SMS OTP is a very, very bad idea. But there also, the fraudsters try to get an SMS OTP validation, which is generated actually by the transaction that they are building in the background against the legitimate website. And which brings us to the goals of this attack. The first goal, of course, is to gain access to the legitimate website using login and password. So this is a method which is called transaction poisoning. What the fraudsters will do is that in the background of this website, they will create a transaction with the legitimate banking website. So the customer will provide, first thing is login and password. And at the same time, the fraudsters will provide a login and a password to the legitimate banking website in order to get access to the accounts. Then, on the fly, what they will do is that they will get credit card numbers because this has a high value of resale on the dark web. Okay, if I'm a fraudster and I want to create some on-the-side revenue sources and I manage to compromise some credit card numbers, I have two options. Either I'm going to try to leverage this credit card information against a merchant website. Okay, so I will go to Amazon or whatever and buy some goods. Or I will, for example, buy some Bitcoins. So I will use a compromised PayPal account. I will buy some Bitcoins. On the contrary of the popular belief, you can trace Bitcoins, okay? Bitcoins is not so anonymous than that. So what you will do is that then you will exchange those Bitcoins on the dark web against other Bitcoins by an escrow account, and then you will wash those Bitcoins and you will transfer them in another kind of currency and start providing and start transferring all this to another PayPal account. Or as an option, if you collect a high number of credit card information, you can resell those credit card numbers directly on the darknet. And this is something we see a lot on what we call valid stores, which sell bulks of 200 credit card numbers with all the details, name, identity, address, phone number, etc., etc. So this is an interesting side revenue for fraudsters most of the time. And then the third stage is to validate a transaction poisoning or a merchant transaction using an SMS, because since a lot of financial institutions or governments still use validation by SMS, once the transaction is created on the fly, the merchant website or the bank or the government will ask for an SMS OTP. The SMS OTP will be received by the victim, and the victim will give this SMS OTP to the phishing website, which will enter this SMS OTP on the legitimate website. So as we see, this represents quite a lot of engineering. I mean, we need to give credit to the guys. Those phishing infrastructure are getting smarter and smarter. They are usually very well built by very skilled programmers. And excuse me. And this kind of engineering was initially created with a reason, which was to attack high-value targets with very high volumes. The problem is that this kind of attacks that I'm describing right now doesn't work on tier 1 anymore. Okay, companies such as mine have created some infrastructure, some protection framework in order to defeat those kind of attacks. So tier 1 institutions are no longer a valid target for this kind of technology. And this is why we are seeing fraudsters using this advanced engineering, those advanced phishing attacks, to target lower level targets such as tier 2 and tier 3 institutions. On the next session, we will go back on this kind of phishing attacks, and we will elaborate on the other kind of phishing attacks we can see as a kind of threat which are targeting tier 2, tier 3 institutions, and we will specifically learn how to defeat them using the Appgate DTP framework. So thank you very much. Once again, in the chat section, I think you have a form if you wish to have some more information or register an interest. This was Matthew Platten. I take care of the fraud management operations for Channel IT. You have my email, you have my phone number. I'm always on WhatsApp. If you have any questions, comments, please do not hesitate. I wish you all a very, very good day. This is a follow-up session from my plenary session we had on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we saw a typical phishing attack, and we had a little brief about the phishing activity we were seeing. Today, what we're going to do is that we are going to have a look on how we can defeat phishing fraud using the Appgate DTP framework technology. So, just a brief for those who were not there 2 days ago. So this is the typical phishing bait we are seeing at the moment. So we have a strong identity or domain spoofing through emails, typically. A typical threat, so in this example, this is a bank, but it would work for plenty of different institutions. And of course, a malicious link, which is typically redirecting towards a phishing link in a phishing website. Once we are on the phishing website, what we are seeing is usually a URL shaping made to impersonate or lure the potential victim into thinking that he's on the legitimate institution website. So most people do not understand how subdomain works. This is why this kind of attack is so successful. Then we would have a page shaping where the original page would be displayed on the phishing web page via a referral link. And then we would have the attack itself, typically via CSS shaping or a malicious link, in order for the fraudsters to collect the information that is relevant to them. So this is a topic we already covered 2 days ago, so I will not go more into details. Why does stopping digital threats pay off early? Well, it's typically a no-brainer. Stopping digital threats such as phishing makes it easier to prevent loss first. The second thing is that this protects the brand trust. When we are speaking of institution protection, we can consider two kinds of assets. We can consider tangible assets, which is typically money, which means that if your institution is attacked and some money is stolen, either from the people with who you work, either through your customers, typically this has a cost for you as an institution because you are going to have to pay some money back. So this is open to debate. Right now, for example, we have a case here. I am in Cyprus, where you have a bank which is refusing to pay when somebody gets compromised and loses money via phishing. But typically, banks will pay off. So this represents a strong tangible asset for you. But next to this, we have another kind of asset, which is an intangible asset. And this is how those attacks are detrimental to your brand. Okay, you cannot quantify this, this value, but it is definitely a value. There is a lack of trust which is introduced by recurring phishing attacks impersonating your brand. Another example, another interest is how you can deter attackers. Okay, so the concept of deterrence is really important because the attackers do not have typically a personal grudge against you. They do use the brand, they do use an institution or a financial establishment as a tool in order to extract money from their customers or their constituents. If this tool doesn't work, it's very easy. They will just pick up a new tool. It's a little bit like going for a hike with a group of friends, and if a bear comes out of the forest and starts chasing you, there is absolutely no way you can outrun the bear because he's faster and stronger than you. But it is in order to escape the bear, you don't need to outrun him. You just need to be a little bit faster than the slowest of your friends. And this is exactly how deterrents work. The interest of stopping digital threats is to make you absolutely unattractive to fraudster, because fraudster knows when they try to leverage your brand or your institution in order to create phishing attacks, they are wasting their time because those attacks are not going to be effective. Of course, it lowers the investigation overhead because every time you see a phishing attack which is leveraging your identity, this is going to mean investigation. And the finality, obviously, is to reduce the attack volume. You need to halt fraud attack before they even reach the customers. So introducing the Digital Threat Protection Framework from Appgate. So the idea is to map, monitor, protect all your digital footprint. And this means monitoring thousands of social media sites, monitoring hundreds, if not thousands, of mobile application stores, searching all the search engines for malvertising campaigns, providing detection and takedown on those threats. This means monitoring the dark web for compromised information, stolen credentials, and of course monitoring very closely your website for defacement, SSL compromise, DNS activity, which is not perfectly aligned with your policies, and availability of your pages. So how does this work? The Digital Threat Protection Platform provides an online real-time analysis of every single incoming connection on your infrastructure. This is checked for origin point legitimacy, page integrity, and frame injection presence. Every single connection can be analyzed,
and vital information about this connection can be run directly via a set of algorithms. One of them is called Swordfish, the other one is called Hungrypo, which will determine if the incoming connections on your infrastructure and on your web pages are legitimate or if they represent a risk. When it happens that they represent a risk, what will happen is that those threats will be directly live analyzed by the SOC team in Appgate headquarters. Every single alert will be represented on your system, and the URL origin point of the alert, IP address in originating country will be insulated. When this happens, we will introduce the new victim insight technology, because when a web page starts phishing your identity, we do know that the peak of the attack is between 40 minutes and 1 hour. So of course, all providers provide takedown, us included. But what happens is that when we have a takedown, the best time on average that a takedown can occur is around 4 hours. And this is a very good time. Typically, the takedown industry is more around 20 hours of delay for taking down a phishing page. But we have an average of 4 hours. But this is still too long, because when the attack happens, the efficiency, the maximum peak efficiency of the attack is between 40 minutes and 1 hour. So Victim Insight provides you live, real-time insight on the information that is being compromised on the phishing website. This information is being communicated to our customers in real time, which means that this information, compromised passwords, compromised login, credit card information, can be directly invalidated on your infrastructure. This information is provided via a portal or an API in an encrypted form, which means that only you and nobody else has access to this compromised information. Having this information is absolutely vital, because this allows you to nullify the effectiveness of the phishing attacks on your infrastructure. Once again, if a fraudster runs a phishing website and starts compromising this information, when the fraudster will start to leverage this information against you, typically by creating, as we saw in our scenario, merchant transactions or accessing your website using the compromised login and password, those login and passwords will already have been deactivated, which means that the attack will be totally useless. If this happens once, the odds that the fraudster will try again are very, very slim. Of course, another element which is vital is to monitor the dark web. Today, the dark web represents around, well, there is no exact numbers, but the best estimation thinks that the dark web represents 80% of the data available online. This is absolutely huge. There is an image that we always use, it's an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is basically Google, Microsoft, and all the other services use on a daily basis. Everything under the water is the darknet. So you will find a lot of valid stores, you will find a lot of repositories, you will find a lot of non-indexed websites, you will find a Tor network, you will find a free network, you will find a rapid share network, you will find the rabbit network, etc., etc., etc. Everything works essentially around onions, which means that those are hashed URLs which cannot be traced. The dark web is a huge source of information and a fantastic tool for fraudsters. This is why most of the exchanges regarding fraud, regarding the resale of compromised information happens there. We provide a live exploration and data collection of all the compromised data addressing your brand on the darknet. This includes leaked employees' credentials. We also have the capability of monitoring chats like IRC
for the old guys like me, they will remember what is IRC network, Telegram, and all the information is reported live to our customers. So if we consider a phishing attack and we look at the escalation of this phishing attack over time. First case, phishing website pops out. This phishing website is usually created in online before the phishing attack starts, because as soon as the emails are sent, the fraudster needs to have already his infrastructure in place for the people to access and start getting compromised. So on this, we offer real-time detection of this phishing attack, either by analyzing the referral connections which are coming to your website, either via crawler, either via weblog analysis. A spoofed email can be sent to the targets. Typically, the spoofed email will impersonate your domain. This can be detected and blocked using our DMARC technology in our portal. Once the website is in place, we will start collection of compromised credentials with the Victim Insight technology. Those compromised credentials can be transferred to your infrastructure in real time for deactivation. All those steps happen in a matter of seconds. Automation is therefore vital. There is no way this can be done manually by operators. Then those credentials can be directly blocked, so the fraudsters cannot leverage them against your infrastructure. And finally, once this is done, Appgate can move for takedown and remove the threat online. So as you see, all those elements can happen in real time. Only the final stage, which is the removal of the website or of the threat or the social media, for example, from the internet, comes later. Okay, all the rest happens in real time. Safe browsing and device analytics. This is the second stage of the fraud protection. Today, most of the transactions happen over a mobile device. Okay, mobile device represents more than half of the online banking transactions, and the number is rising. So we provide the DSB technology. The DSB technology allows you to harden the communications between handheld devices and computers between the customer and your infrastructure. Because every time a customer connects to your infrastructure, his device becomes de facto an extension of your own network. And this device needs to be analyzed for threats and needs to be protected. So this technology comes in two flavors. A DSB clientless solution, where this technology is embedded directly in your website and activated on the customer's computer when they access this website, and an SDK that can be directly integrated inside your mobile applications for easy deployment. The features of this technology is mainly around authorizing and detecting threats on the mobile device or the computer of your customers. Therefore, the clientless features are very, very straightforward. They detect targeted attack, they detect malware and provide malware snapshots, and they are also capable of providing a contextual analytics of the device which is being used. This also includes unique device ID for action tracing. The device also integrates some behavioral profiling. We are capable with this technology to check and to validate the identity of a user using keystroke and mouse pattern recognition, which means that every single user moves his mouse and types on his keyboard a different way. The behavior of the user can therefore be recognized using this technology, and eventually, depending on the risk, transaction can be granted or blocked. When it comes to mobile device, different risk level can be selected. For example, it is possible to block certain combination of factors or to completely restrict some others. The factors which can be enabled are rooted phone, debug mode enable, if the phone is connected to an insecure network, if the device is face down, if it is not a device but a simulator, if there is an ongoing farming attack, or if the application being used to connect to your infrastructure has been repackaged. This can be deployed live, all the conditions can be changed in real time, and these verifications happen pre-login, which means that if one of those security restrictions are met on the device of the customer, the app will not start and the login page will not be displayed. Therefore, the credentials of the users cannot be exposed. The interest of this app is the capability of blocking phishing in real time on mobile devices. We saw that we have the capability of detecting phishing sites with the DTP framework. And now we are seeing with this technology that we have the capability of assessing and enforcing security on handheld device. Since those two technologies communicate in real time, we have the possibility of actively blocking some detrimental behaviors on the mobile device of the customers. Let's imagine that we have our phishing page and that this phishing page is being accessed through the mobile device of a customer. The customer will try to open this phishing page. The SDK provided by us will kick in. It will verify the threat watch list on our cloud services. And since there is a phishing attack ongoing, the access to this phishing site will be blocked from all the devices from all your customers. This there also happens in real time, which means that by deploying this technology, your customers cannot physically access the phishing websites once this phishing website has been detected. Now, a word about authentication. Password is dead. Everybody knows it. Okay. Today, a simple login and password is not sufficient in order to authenticate yourself online. There is multiple reasons to it. The first reason is that everybody has multiple accounts. And we have so many accounts that, me included, we all do the same thing. We use the same password for all the accounts. Out of those multiple accounts, the odds are that one of those accounts has been compromised. The login password pair has a value. Okay, banking credentials are resold on the dark web. So remember that the DTP provides a dark web investigation feature where those compromised credentials can be found. Okay, but nevertheless, there is a value to those dark web, to those credentials, and they are for sale. Another critical point is that 81% of breaches are carried out through stolen credentials. There also, this is something I was already saying on Wednesday. If we remember all the major attacks, HSBC, Halifax, Lloyd's, Marriott, etc., etc., all those attacks have been initiated by a phishing attack against the brand. And the finality of those phishing attacks very often is to obtain credentials. So this is something to consider if you do not enforce any second factor. And anyway, most citizens' identity have been compromised already, which means that when one of your customers or one of your citizens creates a new account and they use the same password to create this new account. This password is already compromised when the identity or the profile is being created. So what can we do? Well, the idea is to use modern authentication for modern users. The deployment of advanced factors, unified integration, and comprehensive security for all the channels in an easy integration allows to deploy factors such as fingerprint recognition, push notification, which is not SIM dependent, unlike an SMS, OTP, and QR code validation. Deploying those technologies not over SMS, but over a modern authentication framework drastically diminishes the risk of identity compromised, and in some cases suppress it completely. I was speaking recently with one of my customers, and he told me something. Basically, the biggest task of their online assistants is to provide new passwords and new login to their customers. This is what they do 80% of the time. Nobody can remember highly complex passwords, highly complex login, if they're all different. Modern authentication in modern third factor will allow institutions to completely suppress the need for a login and password. Ask me for a demo, you will see how it works. It's quite impressive. So in order to achieve such a feat, we provide an authentication framework, which is a multi-channel, multi-factor, multi-device, single authentication framework. All you have to do is send an authentication request, and everything is handled by the framework. The factors available are quite numerous. We have face and voice biometrics, fingerprint biometrics, push authentication, soft token, device authentication, geolocation, QR authentication, SMS OTP for the legacy systems, PIN passphrases, and digital certificates. Biometric authentication is typically achieved leveraging the technology on the mobile devices of the customers. So what is the user experience? Well, let's say that a user needs to authenticate. It is very easy to log on the web page of the institution and just request a simple authentication. The Detector ID framework will send a secure encrypted push message directly to the mobile phone of the customer. The mobile phone of the customer can then be used in order to authenticate. Therefore, the login and password is not necessary, because in order to authenticate on the mobile device, the user needs to prove his identity, either by facial recognition, either by fingerprint. The system is vastly superior to the SMS authentication, which is still used by most institutions. When an institution sends an SMS, they get just a sending confirmation. They know the SMS was sent. They don't know to who it was sent. They don't know what route the SMS took, and they don't know if the SMS was received by the right person. They don't know anything. They just know they sent an SMS. In the best case scenario, this SMS will have some information about the amount of the transaction, or the type of transaction, or the type of authentication. But most of the time, it's just a 6-digit number. The push notification is much more advanced. When you send a push notification using the Detector ID framework, you leverage an AES 256 encryption, which is non-reversible. Actually, yes, sorry. You leverage an AES 256 encryption, which cannot be broken, but it is reversible. Sorry, of course, because it's an encryption. You will get a sending confirmation with a traceable transaction ID. You will have delivery confirmation, read confirmation, and a message acknowledgement. On this message acknowledgement, it can just be a OK button, or you can request fingerprint validation. So this is vastly superior because it eliminates the risk of a SIM card cloning attack. If you use an SMS, what happens is that if anybody else has a newer SIM card version with the phone number of the user, he will get the SMS, and you have absolutely no way of knowing that the SIM card has been compromised. In this case, this is SIM card independent, which means only the device is being used, regardless if there is a SIM card in it or not. And the identity of the account holder can be verified. This technology there also is provided in an SDK format. So the integration of this technology inside your applications is very, very straightforward. So this concludes my presentation for today. Once again, check in the chat section. Do not hesitate to visit us on our website, Channel IT. I wish you an excellent end of summit. And if you have any questions, we'll be very, very happy to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Platten.
I'm giving you back 15 minutes.
Yes. We can have a discussion. You can tell us some things about the General for Channel IT and the activities that you have and the services in
Absolutely.
Greece and in other
Absolutely.
countries.
So Channel IT is a master distributor for Appgate. Appgate is a medium-sized company based in Miami, which has been specializing in providing fraud protection solutions to government, institutions and banks since 15 years now. What happened is that we worked very closely with Appgate since 5 years now. And Appgate has just decided to channel all their expertise via Channel IT for Europe and Middle East, which means we are now the master distributor for the Appgate technology. Some other solutions of Appgate I did not present here today. This also includes a risk orchestrator solution, which is more targeted for the banking industry, which allows to implement complex logics in the context of the PSD2 regulation, which banks have to put in place now. And also some other technologies which are more dedicated to governments.
Can you tell us some things about the partnership that you have with vendors or other kind of companies?
Absolutely. So Appgate is one of our partners, but we also provide unified SSL solutions with some other partners. We provide also some sandboxing capability. We are also a partner of Trend Micro. We are also a partner of Zoho, and we are having also a lot of success with the Manage Engine brand. So all those technologies are available through Channel IT in Greece, in Cyprus, of course.
Do you see some opportunities these days in Greece and Cyprus regarding the remote working, regarding the digital transformation?
Well, the first critical point to address in Greece and Cyprus is the ongoing and the rise of the digital fraud targeting financial institutions. This is getting in Cyprus and in Greece to a critical point. And I think it is really time for institutions such as governments and banks to start addressing the problem very, very, very seriously. So a lot of work has been done already, but we are seeing a very strong resurgence in this activity, and the complexity of the attacks targeting them is on the rise. I mean, I'm seeing right now 3 to 4 attacks per week. So the volume of attack is getting it's just getting crazy. And unfortunately, the reason why this volume is getting so high is because those attacks are being at the moment very successful. Okay. Last year, the losses were already pretty severe, but this year is going to beat the record. The fact that more and more people are remotely working now is giving fraudsters a huge edge on their possibilities of compromising credentials and compromising financial information. I think it is time to really step up our game when it comes to authentication, mobile device security, and brand protection online. Yes.
And what about the human factor? What you can do to enhance the cybersecurity awareness?
Okay, so I'm going to be very blunt here, and I'm going to make a lot of enemies, but education of human factor doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Since 15 years now, we've been seeing governments and banks putting disclaimers on their website saying, do not trust SMS, we will never ask you for your password, we will never ask you for your credit card information, we will never do this, we will never do that. And despite this, phishing is still working.
Mm-hmm.
Educating peoples is very admirable, but it is, unfortunately, when it comes to social engineering, not an efficient approach. Because social engineering, phishing is social engineering, okay, exploits the weakest link inside the security of organizations. And this weakest link will always be the human being.
Mm-hmm.
And educating human beings is unfortunately not an efficient process. It just doesn't work. A lot of companies have tried, a lot of awareness programs are being run inside companies. It is now mandatory in Europe. You need to have some awareness training on information security. And despite this, spear phishing attacks are still successful. Phishing is still successful. Obtaining credentials of an employee on his network is laughably easy. Before working with Appgate in Channel IT, I had a small penetration testing company, and I was specialized in providing some social engineering benchmarking for small to medium enterprises in the area of Monaco. And I had so much success that actually my customers had to rethink completely their approach to authentication, because obtaining login and password of employees was just child's play.